Is America losing the war on terror? Over 60% of American residents disapprove of President Obama's handling of the militant threat, with only about half expressing confidence that the Obama administration can protect American citizens from future acts of terrorism. In fact, the lack of confidence in Washington's performance against the terrorist menace is now higher than at any point since the September the 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks in New York.
Meanwhile, Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi has vowed to rid Iraq of ISIL in 2016. It's plausible. Even British Foreign Secretary Philip Hammond praised Baghdad after government forces liberated the city of Ramadi from the Takfiri terrorists, as did President Francois Hollande. Army soldiers and popular mobilization units are in action in militant-held northern and western parts of Iraq, plagued by violence since ISIL began their Iraq offensive in June 2014.
Why won't Obama admit his inability to stop terrorism? Should he be sanctioned for his failure to act effectively against ISIL? And has any American president intervened in Iraq without destroying it? These are the simple questions we sought to answer. Now, a new poll by CNN and ORC reveals that most Americans disapprove of President Obama's handling of his job. What has been Obama's biggest failure? That's what we began by asking the American public.
I'm from Australia, so I'm not 100% sure what everything is, but I mean, from our views, I think he's done a pretty good job, really, but so I don't really know anything that he's done wrong, sorry.
His ability to unite the Senate to get bills through?
I had no comment, honestly.
Incompetence, and he's happy with his ignorance.
In my opinion, it was the health care. He did not, when he campaigned, I was a volunteer and I helped, and I went to his one of his rallies at George Mason University in Virginia. And he said that we would like a public option, which is like Medicare for all. And when he got in, he dropped that from the negotiating table.
You know, I think he's been trying to please too many people, and sometimes when you try to play both sides, you end up not being effective in either direction.
Well, I approve of his handling of his job. It's the Congress and the extremists in Congress that have prevented him to be more successful in what he's doing.
Foreign policy, I think.
Oh, I'm a big fan of Obama, I've got to tell you. So I think he's stronger domestic than in foreign policy, but I'm a big Obama fan.
Well, I do believe that he does try to play both sides, but by early on in his presidency, being willing to listen to a fairly irrational point of view, which was his opposition. I think he waited too long to do some of the things he's ended up doing in his second term. So.
We invited our experts to share their assessment of Obama's greatest failure as American president.
What are Barack Obama's failures? Where do we start from with his failures of Barack Obama? He's got a list of failures, both internally and externally, on internal policies and external policies. One of his failures, if you ask the Republicans, is he's not even managed to convince people that he's not a Muslim. 43% of Republicans still think he's a Muslim. But beyond that, what's even worse is this whole list of failures that he's actually had domestically, such as immigration. Over 2 million undocumented immigrants have been sent back. The big banks that caused the big crash under his watch, they've all got Wells Fargo, the Bank of America, so on and so forth. They've got bigger, they've got stronger, whereas people have ended up having food stamps and the poverty has increased in many of the states in the US, all under his watch. With education, Annie Duncan, who's been named as the head of education, is a corporate figure. Privatization, bringing in the big corporates that everybody thought Obama will be against. Surveillance, drones, the list goes on and on. Where do we stop?
I think Obama's biggest failure is that he's not been able to accompany the economic growth that was made possible by his own programme of fiscal stimulus has not been able to ensure that that economic growth was accompanied by a higher wages, which would serve then to offset the decline in the standard of living which took place for most working class and middle class families in the aftermath of the 2008 banking crisis. And this failure then is accompanied by the increase in polarisation in US society, where there's been actually an increase in social exclusion during the Obama presidency.
60% of Americans disapprove of Obama's handling of terrorism. He knew of ISIL's threat at least 2 years ago, before ISIL started expanding, yet he failed to act. Do the public feel he should be punished for ISIL's death and destruction, and if so, how?
You can't be punished for the past. I mean, that's something that went by already, and just because you're slow in responding, that's just what happened. That's part of the policies, and if the policies are ineffective, you have to wait for the next guy to come along. When the next guy come along, maybe something else will change.
I don't think you can really put that on one person, so I wouldn't say it's necessarily his fault.
Yes, I'm not sure that he should be punished personally. I think he's acted in the best interests of the nation from his perspective and from the perspective of the people.
I don't think he could foresee it and intentionally didn't do something about it. I do think he didn't handle certain aspects of the conflict as well as he should have. I don't see him as having to be punished per se for handling it terribly.
I don't think you can really punish him for, trying to, he's making decisions that have such consequences. I don't think anyone is in a position to judge as long as he's not waterboarding.
I think that's a tough one. I think he was so intent on getting us out of the military, and I think that we got caught and we're behind in terms of the ISIS situation, but I don't think he should be punished. I don't believe in punishment.
Well, I mean, I don't think that you can really punish a president for a lack of judgment in that regard. I think past presidents have also made mistakes. I mean, you could also argue that Bill Clinton knew about September 11th while he was in presidency, but you can't punish someone for not taking an appropriate action.
With 6 out of 10 Americans not liking Obama's handling of terrorism, and considering he didn't act when he could have, what do our experts feel would be an appropriate sanction for all the trouble ISIL has subsequently caused?
Barack Obama is single-handedly responsible for creating the fiasco that has occurred in the Middle East, thanks to the surrogate body known as ISIL. The failure to act, not only the failure to act, but the encouragement Obama and his cronies gave to ISIL, to other organizations in the Middle East, whose only aim is to actually create mayhem and to go around killing, has been catastrophic for the whole region. We look for Libya, we look to Syria, we look to what's happening in Yemen now under Saudi Arabia. Basically, Barack Obama, all his friends and all his cronies are involved in dismantling, breaking down and creating havoc within the Middle East. How do we punish him for that? Well, I think that's just going to have to be divine vengeance on Mr. Barack Obama, because the history books will tell us what a pathetic, blood-loving, blood-sucking leader he's actually been. He may have a nice smile, he may look good, he may have all that razzmatazz about him and take selfies and so on and so forth, but you know what? The truth never lies.
I don't think it's a matter of seeking to punish Obama for his failure to act earlier on the ISIL or Daesh threat. I think it's really about learning lessons. And what we've seen, and what has been a failure of the Obama administration, is it has failed to seek a wider alliance against terrorism, particularly involving Russia and China, but also major regional players like Iran. And instead we see the United States leading the attempts to curtail Russia through sanctions. We also see them facing against the Chinese in the South China Sea with their warships. And rather than such an aggressive posture in relation to Russia and China in particular, I think we would be much better served as an international community if the USA as a leading player was seeking increasing alliance with these new emerging powers in order to stem the terrorist menace. And we've partially seen that with the latest UN Security Council resolution, which was unanimous, but this has to be much deeper and much more developed.
Research shows that half of America has no confidence that the Obama administration can protect American citizens from future attacks of terrorism. Why won't Obama admit his inability to stop terrorism? We asked the public to speculate.
There's no way to stop it. Terrorism's been here throughout the ages. There's always been terrorism. Genghis Khan used to terrorize all of Europe. Hitler terrorized Europe. It's not one individual issue. It's something that happens.
I don't know. You can't leave it up to one man to stop terrorism. It's a very different environment that people are living in over there, and it's not up to one guy, one country to take care of.
I don't think a president would ever admit that they are unable to protect and to serve the country, and I wouldn't expect them to either because it's a sign of weakness. So I don't think that he will ever admit that, even if that's how he felt.
I think it's a very dangerous thing to admit defeat against an organization that is so violent, especially towards women.
I think people have simplified the question. I don't think it's very easy to. I don't think it's stopping terrorism. I think we're going to be living in a time when terrorism is part of sort of our country and who we are. And I think it's a matter more of, I wish I could say we could stop it. I think it's a matter of really trying to deal with it. I don't know. It's more complicated than I feel I'm, able to answer.
Terrorism is very difficult to stop because terror is a state of mind. It's a fear. So how do you stop someone's fear? Well, I don't think that one person can do that. So I think also Obama's administration is almost over. So there's not much time left. He's got maybe 1 year. I think we really need to be looking to the future.
What is preventing the American president from admitting that his administration cannot protect US citizens from future terrorist attacks? Can our experts provide clarity?
There's a fundamental reason why he won't admit that he can't stop terrorism, and that is they are encouraging the terrorism in the first place. They come into power in America saying, we are going to protect the freedoms of the nation, we're going to protect everything that this nation stands for. Yet when you see what they're doing abroad, namely, they're encouraging everything that they're saying, everything that stands against what they're saying they stand for. So whether it's ISIL, whether it's Daesh, whether it's other organizations in the further world, Barack Obama and the American administration are responsible for nurturing, for creating, for running the finance, the oil going through Turkey for ISIL, so on and so forth. So he will not admit that he's unable to stop terrorism for a simple reason. He is the cause of global terrorism. That's why. And it's slowly coming out. His inaction, his refusal to do anything to the countries which are actually responsible for creating the terrorists. Saudi Arabia creating Daesh. Turkey facilitating the funding of these things. And where's this money being whitewashed? Could it be possibly in American corporate banks?
I don't think it's really a question, again, I'm sorry to keep interrogating the questions, but I don't think it's a question of admitting the inability. This would signal a defeatist posture. Rather, I think that a closer examination of the US's role in relation to enabling the terrorist formations to develop. There will inevitably be reluctance amongst the US establishment to do this, however, because that would require an intense examination going right back to the 1970s, particularly in Afghanistan, where the formations that would come to form al-Qaeda really cut their teeth on the international arena. And again, we see a continuation then of a Cold War posture, previously against the Soviet Union, but now against Russia and China. And we have to move on to a post-Cold War perspective where the menace of terrorism is confronted and the necessary alliances are formed.
The Iraqi army has again defeated ISIL to win back another city, Ramadi. Do the public consider it embarrassing that the US has failed to defeat ISIL while Iraq is doing so time and time again?
Iraq has taken back Ramadi. It took them a long time. They were shamed because they left in a hurry. They had outnumbered ISIS and they just dashed away from Ramadi. So it was about time that they get back into Ramadi. The big test for the Iraqis will be Mosul. So we'll see.
I think this is amazing because what we need is more of this, like manpower on the ground, the locals defeating ISIS, not just America coming in with drones and, arms. Like, we need the locals.
I'm not going to speculate about America versus the Iraqis' army and the police, but from my understanding, I believe that most of the American troops left a couple years ago. Whether or not you agree they should have left or should have stayed is your opinion. But I believe that most American forces are not in Iraq any longer. So I think it's a good sign that the Iraqis are able to push back ISIS, because it shows that they're able to begin to take control of a country that is unfortunately really in a lot of trouble.
Well, I'm glad to hear that Iraq is making some progress in that area. I don't know how to respond otherwise to that.
How humiliating is it for America to observe the Iraqi military making significant gains against ISIL, while the US efforts seem doomed to fail at every attempt? We asked our experts.
Hang your head in shame, Mr. Obama. Hang that head of yours in shame. There is no doubt Barack Obama has not only failed to defeat ISIL, he's actually increased the presence of ISIL by increasing the way it's funded, by increasing the channels through which people can get there and actually fight on behalf of ISIL. Barack Obama has no intention of removing ISIL. It's only now because the other countries like Russia, countries like Iran and so on and so forth, are actually taking an active role that he's thinking, oh dear, I better do something about it. But in the end of the day, it is the Iraqi nation, the Iraqi people who are defeating ISIL. They're the ones who are being killed. They're the ones who are bearing the brunt of it. They're the ones who every day are being subjected to this nasty, heinous organisation known as ISIL, which is funded, after all, by Barack Obama's closest allies, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Qatar, so on and so forth. So he will be remembered on this issue for doing absolutely nothing. Nothing.
I don't think we should see this matter as embarrassing to the United States. I think that if we're objective observers and assessors of the situation, then we have to recognise that the successes for the armed forces of Iraq couldn't take place without international assistance. And at the moment, the primary international assistance that's been received is, I think, US air cover for the Iraqi armed forces and militias. Again, I recur on the theme that this could be much more successful given a wider global participation, particularly with the emerging powers of China, Russia, but also the regional power Iran. But nevertheless, I don't think it's an embarrassment for the US administration. On the contrary, I think that we need to see, as civilized sections of the society, that these are gains for the Iraqi armed forces. It is taking place at the moment with the cooperation of the United States, but we need a much wider cooperation, and we need to ensure that the conflicts in Iraq and Syria especially do not turn into conflicts between Russia in particular on the one hand and the United States on the other. We have to focus on the issue of terror and I think we should all be pleased at the successes of the Iraqi forces.
Do you know of any American president who has intervened in Iraq without destroying it? That's a question we pose to the public.
No, I don't know. I really don't know. Okay. I can't say one way or the other.
No, I don't.
Yeah, the answer is still no. No, the answer is no. No president at all.
I'm not aware of it, but I don't know the history of back for 50 or 60 years ago.
Did Clinton never? He never intervened in Iraq. He never did anything in Iraq. I don't know. I think there's always going to be troubles when America intervenes in another country.
No, I do not know of any president that has not intervened without destroying Iraq, no.
I think invading Iraq was probably one of the worst decisions in this country's history altogether. So, and it's worse off today than it used to be, years ago before it was invaded.
I don't think anyone in the United States knows how to intervene without destroying something.
I think it's terrible that we've been involved in destruction in Iraq. Do I know of somebody who's been involved in Iraq without destroying it? Is that the question? Yes. No.
No. No, I don't.
Can our experts think of an occasion when any American president has successfully acted in Iraq and not caused the ruin of that country as a result?
Let me think about that one. No. Is a simple answer. We had George Bush Sr., who was involved in the first Gulf War with his Arab army that went in and really didn't do much. He allowed Saddam to destroy the South and destroy the North. So that was a direct implication of the American policy then. Then we had George Bush Jr., who actually went in to Iraq and absolutely decimated it. And now we've got Barack Obama, who's actually added to all that through his particular way of crisis management, or mismanagement, should I say. Look, at the end of the day, it's a deliberate policy to destroy the Middle East, to destabilize the Middle East. And it's very ironic, isn't it? If you look at all the countries around one particular nation, that nation, or nation's probably the wrong word, that country is called Israel, every other nation is on fire. Yet that country seems to be beaches, holidays, inviting people to have tourism, and everything else around it is on fire.
Well, I think it's fair to say that any US direct military intervention in Iraq has been destructive. But we're seeing in recent events, with the success of the Iraqi forces against the terrorist forces of ISIL and other such elements, that Iraq is far from destroyed. I think the resilience of the Iraqi people, as continues to be shown, and as I've already said, yes, the US intervention did bring chaos, did bring terrorism, did bring jihadism, but the Iraqi people and their nation are far from destroyed, and I'm confident that they will play their role in this important struggle against the terrorist menace.
Obama has lost the support of his people as president. An even higher number oppose his treatment of the campaign against terrorism. Meanwhile, Iraq has again defeated ISIL to win back a major city, namely Ramadi. For all the resources, influence and military might of America, it seems that Iraq is doing a better job of putting right what Washington, at least in part, has done wrong. This could be the best evidence yet that if America truly wants to help win the war against terrorism, it should leave this fight to others.